Imagine this. You're 21 years old. Your golden boy brother is unwrapping a brand new BMW, a gift for his B+ average. And you? You're celebrating buying your first humble house. He openly mocked my success that day, right there at the family cookout, and that's when I learned my own family saw me as nothing more than a fluke. Just a footnote. But 7 years later, I delivered a much colder, more surgical blow right at his own wedding. This is the story of how I stopped being the family disappointment and started building a legacy they never saw coming. My name is Daniel and I'm 29 now. If you told me 7 years ago I'd own 2 homes, drive a paid-off truck, and run a booming landscaping business with 15 employees, I would have laughed in your face. Not because I lacked dreams. I had huge dreams, but because growing up I was constantly told I was a disappointment. Sometimes the silence was worse than the words. My younger brother Lucas, he was the family's golden boy. And it wasn't subtle. Photos on the fridge, Lucas carrying a prize, birthdays, streamers and expensive bakery cake for Lucas. An 18-year-old getting a brand new BMW, wrapped in a red ribbon because he earned it with a B+ average? You guessed it, Lucas. Meanwhile, I was the kid who graduated high school with a firm handshake and a "so what now?" from my dad. It wasn't that I was dumb. I just didn't fit the mold they wanted. I didn't want to spend my summers working as a lawyer, an investment banker, or shadowing my father. I liked creating things with my hands, mending lawnmowers, mowing grass, painting things they considered work, which in my household meant beneath you. Except in my case it appears it wasn't. 21 I moved out. I took a job with an old man named Tommy who ran a gardening business in town. He was harsh, smoked too much, but he taught me everything. How to bid contracts. How to identify soil issues. How to deal with difficult clients without losing your cool. I saved every single penny. We ate spaghetti 6 nights a week. I worked weekends. Nobody in my family noticed. Nobody asked. I only heard from them when Lucas needed help moving something, or Dad wanted someone to repair the sprinkler line because, "Hey Daniel, you're handy, right?" Anyway, let's fast forward a bit. I'm not trying to tell you my entire life story in one post, but let me lay it out. At 22, I purchased my first fixer-upper house. I did the renovations myself, flipped it, then took that profit and bought a duplex. I rented one half and lived in the other. I didn't post it on Facebook. Didn't bring it up around Thanksgiving. I kept my head down and stayed quiet. That's what you do when your accomplishments make others squint. My family didn't see me as successful, just blue collar. Not in a proud way, more like, well, at least he's not in jail. Meanwhile, Lucas was cruising through Yale, then Stanford grad school, then working at some business that lost millions of dollars while calling itself self-disruptive. When he received Dad's business card at the age of 21, and was assured he would one day take over the firm, I just nodded and smiled. I was used to it by then, although things progressed slowly at first. Then well, we'll get there. It began with my parents' annual family cookout in June. They go all out, hire a caterer, put up tents, invite everyone they've ever met from the Reagan era. I had skipped it for the prior 2 years, citing clients and site inspections, mostly because I didn't want to stand in the backyard making small talk as everyone asked Lucas about his new venture, and then looked at me like I was the guy checking the propane tank. But this year, Grandpa Bill compelled me to go. He's my mom's father. Old school, rough around the edges, and the only person in my family who ever expressed pride in me. He still calls me Daniel the Tank, even though I'm 5 feet 8 inches and built more like a fence post than a linebacker. He said, "If you don't show up this year, I'll make you come over and listen to my golf stories for 6 hours straight." That man once forced me to listen to a 12-minute explanation of a sand trap. So I came. I pulled into the driveway around noon, parked down the street so I wouldn't block anyone, and walked in with a 4-pack of local craft beer I thought Dad might like. Nobody noticed. Lucas's BMW was parked on the lawn like a showpiece, and the music was already blaring from those portable speakers Dad loves to flex with. I spotted Grandpa at the grill, of course, standing next to my Uncle Mike, who was already 2 beers in and talking about inflation like he invented the phrase. Grandpa hugged me and peered at my arms. "You've been lifting bricks or just showing off?" he joked. I grinned and shrugged. A little of both. We talked for a while. He inquired about my work, and when I mentioned that I was on the verge of landing a commercial landscaping contract with a downtown hotel, His brow furrowed. That's no small job, he said. Proud of you, Tank. That was the last nice thing anyone said to me that day. I drifted around the rest of the afternoon, nodding at cousins and avoiding conversations. I didn't bring up work, houses, or anything else because I know how this family works. If you're not bragging about a new stock portfolio or a trust fund, they tune you out. Which was fine because I wasn't there to impress anyone. But then I heard a snippet over by the cooler where a couple of my younger cousins were chatting. One of them, about 16, remarked, "Hey, I saw your company vehicles at the old gas station lot on Maple. You guys working on that new park or something?" It was harmless. He wasn't mocking me, just curious. I smiled and nodded. "No, that's not a city project. We're preparing that land for a small plaza, coffee shop, bakery, and a few office spaces. It's private." His eyes widened. "Wait, you own that?" I froze for a second. I didn't mean to say it like that. I usually deflected, but something about how casually he asked, how unjudging he seemed, made me answer honestly. "Yeah," I said. "Closed last month. Second property, actually." And then it happened. The air moved. Lucas had been walking behind me. I hadn't noticed him, but now he was standing far too close, holding a glass of white wine and making that smug expression he usually made when he was going to say something backhanded. "You own 2 properties," he said, loud enough for people to turn their heads. "Since when?" I turned slowly. I kept my voice low and added, "A few years now." To which he laughed. "You, Daniel, the lawn guy?" Someone near the grill chuckled. Someone else went silent. Grandpa's head turned just slightly. I opened my mouth to respond, but Lucas kept going. "Wow. I suppose it's true what they say. Even a damaged clock is accurate twice a day." I just grinned. "You're not mistaken. I merely chose to make my own clock." He frowned. "So what? You're a huge real estate magnate now? Do 2 homes and a few grass hackers qualify you as Donald Trump?" "I never said that," I said. "But it's working for me." Mom came at that point as if she had seen the tension building. "Brandon, dear, could you get me some of that rose from the cooler inside?" she begged, resting a hand on his arm. But he didn't move. He just stared at me. "You always act so smug," he said suddenly, "as if you're better than us because you got out early. You assume your small dwellings and pickup vehicle prove you've made it." "I don't think I'm better than anyone," I responded, my voice steady. "I just quit waiting for a pat on the head." He went nearer. "Do you think Dad is proud of you?" I didn't respond. And that's when Dad lost it. Dad tossed his drink onto the grass, not at me, but hard enough that the glass smashed against a lawn chair. Mom screamed and backed away. A few people turned toward the noise. Some of the older relatives froze. One of the little kids began crying. And then, because this is my family, and nothing can happen without a performance, Mom began crying as well. "I can't believe this is happening at my barbecue," she sobbed. "Why can't you boys just support each other?" Lucas didn't look at her. Grandpa stepped forward slowly, leaned on his cane, looked at Lucas, then at me, then back at Lucas, and then laughed. A dry, wheezing chuckle that cut through the tension like a knife. I didn't move. Didn't flinch. And then he said something. Something that made Mom stop sobbing. Something that made Lucas pale and the entire table silent. Grandpa adjusted his cane and stared directly at Lucas with the type of heavy stillness that only elderly men can pull off. "Boy," he said, "if Daniel is the letdown, then what does that make you? You could have heard a mosquito fall on the potato salad." Lucas blinked as if he didn't quite process it. Mom's lips opened slightly, and I believe the wind stopped. Grandpa didn't elaborate. He just gave me a little nod, as if he'd had that line in his back pocket for years. And now that he'd played it, he was done talking. He turned around and walked back toward the grill, muttering something to Uncle Mike about the ribs being overcooked. The silence didn't last long. Lucas stormed off toward the house, muttering under his breath. Mom scurried after him, still clutching that half-empty wine glass, looking over her shoulder at me as if I'd somehow orchestrated all of it. And just like that, the party resumed. People laughed a little too loudly, and someone turned up the music. Dad didn't say a word, just stood near the beer cooler, shaking his head as if the whole thing was beneath his notice. That was always his move. Emotional detachment. Let Mom be the heart, Lucas be the crown jewel, and he'd stay above it all. I stayed for another hour, talked to Grandpa again, and he didn't mention the scene. We talked about tomato plants, and just before I left, he handed me a napkin with a name and number scribbled on it. A friend of his who managed a lot of commercial rentals. "Tell him I sent you," he said. "He'll treat you fair." I thanked him and left quietly. That night, Lucas posted some cryptic nonsense on Instagram, something like, "Funny how snakes can wear flannel." The caption was vague, but the timing was obvious, so I ignored it. I had a meeting with a contractor the next morning and didn't have the energy to dissect his little tantrums. I wish I could say that was the end of it, that the drama died down and everyone moved on. But Lucas doesn't. He circles and stews. He needs to win, even if it's a race no one else is running. A few weeks later, I received an unexpected call. "Is this Mr. Daniel Foster?" The woman inquired politely and quickly. "Hi, this is Karen from Glendo Bank. I just wanted to clarify that your application for the small business line of credit has been approved. However, we do have a few issues concerning your job verification." I froze. "I didn't apply for any line of credit," I informed them. There was a pause. "Oh, are you not associated with Foster Landscaping LLC?" My heartbeat quickened. "That's my company," I responded slowly. "But I haven't applied for anything in a while. Could you please inform me who submitted it?" She couldn't, of course, due to privacy rules, but she stated that the application had my name, address, and EIN, all of which were correct. My employees had no idea where I lived, and my EIN and home address were not public. I told her it had to be a mistake, possibly fraud. She said she'd flag it and escalate the case. The call ended, but the questions lingered. I called my accountant and we checked the online IRS portal together. There were no other strange filings, nothing amiss, just that one bogus loan application. Then I remember something, that barbecue. I had left my work phone on the patio table for about 8 minutes while I went to get a plate, and it had a simple passcode. Nothing major, but the Notes app. That's where I kept reminders, my EIN, some client addresses, things I needed on the go. I'd meant to password protect it, but I never got around to it. Dumb, I know. And Lucas. Lucas knew my passcode. It used to be the street number of our childhood house, and he teased me about it years ago. I never thought he remembered. I couldn't prove it at the time, but I knew. I didn't confront him because I assumed the failed loan stunt would be a one-time prank to rattle me, the kind of low-blow move you pull when you've run out of comebacks. But it wasn't the end. That fall, I applied for a contract with the local university to landscape 2 dorm buildings and the surrounding quad. I had spent weeks preparing the proposal, evaluating expenses, and gathering references. While the bidding process was competitive, I felt confident. A week before the winning offer was to be announced, I received another call. "Hey Daniel, just wanted to follow up on something weird we saw," said Greg, the university's project coordinator. "One of the admin staff discovered a few complaints regarding your organization, and I wanted to let you know before we leap to conclusions." "Complaints?" I asked. "Yeah, reviews, emails, and even a Better Business Bureau listing said your personnel destroyed property, failed to arrive on time, and so on." I got chilly. "That's not true." "I didn't think so," Greg commented, "but we've got to check it out." I hung up and started looking into it. The reviews were all recent. There were a few anonymous Google entries. One review mentioned a specific property I'd never even worked on, and the BBB complaint, which was barely written in complete sentences, included my business name, EIN, and a phony customer story that sounded just plausible enough to sting. I spent the following 3 days submitting takedowns, checking with clients, and distributing character references. I didn't tell anyone, not even Grandpa, that I had lost the contract because they went with a larger business. I just poured myself into work, kept my head down, and built another layer to the invisible wall between me and the rest of my family. However, the seed had already been sown. Lucas wasn't just insecure. He was prepared to ruin me, and I wasn't going to play defense forever. Around Christmas, the family planned another gathering, this time smaller, with only direct relatives and a few close acquaintances. And Mom demanded I go. "It would mean so much to your brother," she explained over the phone. "Let's just be together. No drama." Agreed, but I informed her right away that I wouldn't be staying long. I arrived with a tin of cookies and a pleasant smile. Lucas opened the door and said nothing. Just looked me up and down like I was a box sent to the wrong house. Inside, Dad was drinking scotch by the fireplace. Mom was fussing over appetizers. The room felt tight, as if all the air had been pretensed for an argument that hadn't started yet. Dinner was strained but civil. Lucas boasted about some consulting gig. Mom kept asking about my dating life, and I gave short answers, not mentioning work or my properties. I didn't say anything about the new vehicle I'd parked down the street until Lucas's fiancée, Olivia, piped up. Olivia was new to the family, courteous and a touch too honest. "I heard you from a few buildings, Daniel." "That is great. Lucas informed me you were quite successful with your landscaping work. I believe it's awesome when people develop something from the ground up." I stared at Lucas. He glared at her as if she had read from a forbidden scroll. "I just mean," she said hurriedly, "it's nice that both of you are doing well." Mom changed the subject. Dad cleared his throat. Lucas excused himself from the table a few minutes later. And after dessert, I grabbed my coat and announced I needed to leave. As I stepped out, Lucas followed me onto the porch, and the door snapped shut behind us. "Do you think you're so clever?" He spoke quietly. I turned slowly. "I guess I am. I'm exhausted. You're attempting to shame me. You think people would be amazed if Olivia looks at you and forgets you've always been a joke." I did not react. "You believe that simply because you cobble together some rental properties and maintain rich people's lawns, you are now equal?" "No," I said. "I don't think we're equal." He grinned. "Exactly." I moved closer. "I believe I exceeded you years ago. You were just too busy looking in the mirror to notice." He became red, his jaw hard. But I was already walking down the steps towards my pickup. That was the night I knew it wasn't over. That was the night I realized Lucas wasn't just mad that I'd built something. He was furious that I'd built it without him. And that's when he did something I never expected. He made Mom cry. Dad finally chose sides. And Grandpa picked up the phone and said 5 words I'll never forget. I didn't hear from Lucas for a few weeks after that night. And to be honest, I was relieved. I'd been living with a constant low-grade tension every time my phone rang or I opened an email from a potential client. Every little delay felt like another torpedo aimed at my business. The air finally felt clear, or at least quiet. I threw myself into work. Winter was slow, but I used it to plan. My second property, the commercial plaza, was nearly ready for phase 2. Tenant interior build-outs. A local bakery had signed on, as had a chiropractor and a small design agency. I was excited even if I kept it to myself. When you're used to being underestimated, success is quiet. In February, I was pulling into the lot of the new property. Still gravel and fencing, but beginning to take shape when my phone rang. It was an unknown number and I normally wouldn't answer, but I had a few contractors out for bid, so I did. "Mr. Foster speaks. This is Officer Keller from the city's commercial compliance section. We have an issue with one of your job locations, 1225 Maple Avenue. Are you available to come to City Hall this afternoon?" My stomach turned. "Sure. Can you explain what this is about?" "There has been an anonymous report submitted. Possible code breaches, dangerous equipment storage, and zoning anomalies. We only need to confirm a few details." I sat in my vehicle for a full minute after hanging up, trying to breathe through it. Not because I expected them to discover anything, I ran a tight ship, but because I knew who was behind it. Lucas. I didn't have evidence yet, but it was his signature all over it. Vague accusations filed anonymously, just enough to cause friction, just enough to slow me down. This wasn't about proving I was a fraud. It was about exhausting me until I broke. That afternoon, I sat across from a tight-lipped woman in a sterile government office, reading through a clipboard of concerns. I smiled and kept my voice calm while I delivered her my permits, zoning permission, and a bundle of safety reports. By the end, she softened and even commented, "This looks like a solid project, Mr. Foster. We'll probably close the complaint with little follow-up." However, the harm had already been done. My contractor contacted me the next day to cancel the bakery construction. The bakery asked for a delay clause in their lease. The chiropractor's lawyer wanted to revisit the contract. And the designer, well, she just stopped communicating with me. His insurance company refused to work on the job until the city confirmed the complaint was false, which could take a few weeks, if not longer. I didn't sleep much that week. I kept replaying every choice I'd made since I started, wondering if I should have gone slower, if I should have simply stuck to lawn care, if my family had been correct, that I'd overreached, that I wasn't meant to win. I was strolling through a Home Depot one evening picking up new parts for one of our trucks when my legs collapsed briefly. I caught myself on a shelf of PVC elbows. I tried to play it off, but I stood there for a long time just breathing. It wasn't the money. I could deal with a setback. It was the why. That it came from inside the house. That my own brother, who had every advantage, couldn't stomach the idea of me building something real. That's when the shame set in. Not for what I'd done, but for what I hadn't done. For how I'd allowed them to continue treating me as the underdog, the side character in their golden boy story. Every time I stayed quiet, every time I played nice, I thought I was being the bigger person. But in reality, I was just making myself small enough to be stepped on. I nearly called Grandpa that night, but I hung up because I didn't want to unload it all on him again. He was in his 80s and didn't need my baggage. But he must have sensed it because the next morning he showed up. Drove right into the gravel lot on Maple in his rusted Ford, parked next to my work truck, and got out like he owned the city. He had 2 coffees in his hand and that same crooked smile. "I figured you might be too proud to call," he said. I took the coffee. We stood there in the wind, watching a backhoe idle near the edge of the property. He didn't ask what happened. He just waited. So I told him everything. The loan application, the fake reviews, the BBB complaint, the anonymous city report, the lost tenants, the ghosted calls, everything Lucas had done, and everything I hadn't done to stop it. Grandpa didn't interrupt. Instead, he sipped his coffee and peered like he was watching a deer walk into traffic. When I finished, he nodded. "You know what your grandmother used to say?" he asked. I shook my head. "There's a special kind of fool that mistakes silence for weakness. You're no fool, Daniel. You're simply patient. However, even waiting has a cost if you don't know when to cash it in." I didn't say anything. "Do you want my advice?" he added. "Stop playing chess with a pigeon." I blinked. "A pigeon?" He grinned. "No matter how good you are, the damn bird's just going to knock over all the pieces and crap on the board." I laughed. I couldn't help but laugh. And that laugh did more for me than coffee. I spent the next 2 days cleaning up the site, tightening every bolt, organizing every record, resubmitting my permits with highlighted copies, writing a personal letter to the bakery owner, offering 1 month's rent for free, calling the chiropractor, scheduling a video walkthrough to demonstrate progress. I couldn't fix everything overnight, but I could demonstrate that I wasn't rattled and that I wasn't going anywhere. Then, because I needed to stop being reactive, I devised a strategy. I began documenting everything. Ordered a camera system for the job sites, not just for security but also for proof. Hired a digital consultant to scrub the fake reviews and trace the IP addresses if possible. I upgraded my accounting software, added new layers of authentication to every app one used, and changed my phone passcode twice. I wasn't going to just defend myself anymore. I was going to build armor. A week later, I received an email informing me that the city had officially dismissed the complaint. The bakery owner signed the lease 2 days later, and the chiropractor followed suit. The designer never returned, but I didn't need her, and the momentum returned. I was at the plaza one morning, piling bags of mulch into a wheelbarrow, when I saw something strange. A black Lexus idling across the street, tinted windows, engine humming, not moving for 8 minutes. Then it slowly pulled away. I knew that car. Lucas. I never waved, just kept working. But something changed in me that day. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was ready. Ready to stop waiting for the next sabotage. Ready to stop playing defense. Ready to stop letting people who had never built anything tell me how much I was worth. I wasn't just going to recover. I was going to win. Not out of spite, but because every nail, contract, and seed I planted had been earned. Not handed to me, funded by Dad, or rescued by some legacy favor. And I was done apologizing for it. I had no idea what Lucas would do next, but I had a feeling. It all began with an invitation. A wedding invitation. And the note Lucas wrote inside it. The invitation came in a thick, cream-colored envelope, sealed with wax, as if we were in some kind of royal court. It would be the final straw, transforming this quiet war into something bigger, something public, something that would expose everything. My name was printed on the front in gold cursive, Mr. Daniel Foster, as if that alone would convince me it wasn't bait. The return address was Lucas's downtown condo, which Dad had co-signed for and boasted of having floor-to-ceiling city views despite facing a parking garage. I sat with the envelope unopened for a day and a half. Not out of dread, but out of interest. I wanted to give myself time to guess. Would it be a typical invitation? A bogus olive branch pretending the past hadn't happened? Or would Lucas do what he usually did and bury a jab in the tiny print? I burst the seal on a frigid Wednesday morning while drinking black coffee in my kitchen. Inside was a folded invitation wrapped in blue ribbon, the type you'd get at a five-star Tuscan wedding. The calligraphy was exquisite. We heartily invite you to the wedding of Lucas Foster and Olivia Langston. Saturday, September 10th, the Langston Estate in Riverbend Hills. Olivia hailed from ancient money. Her family had vineyards and land along the state boundary, and they were the type of folks that had stylists and summer houses rather than holiday rentals. However, the real poison was pinned at the bottom in Lucas's unmistakable calligraphy. I hope this event can help us all move ahead. The dress code is formal. Please leave your work boots at home this time. I wouldn't want you to track muck into the rose garden. B. I sat there gazing at it for a whole minute. Not furious. Not horrified. Just done. This would never stop unless I killed it. I hadn't gone out of my way to embarrass Lucas. I hadn't notified anybody in the family about the bogus complaints, reviews, or sabotage. I didn't retaliate. I just worked harder. But that wasn't enough. And now he was about to marry into a family that thought he was the clean-cut prodigy, the young business executive with charm and legacy. Whereas I was the dropout with dirt under my nails and grass stains on my soul. So I made a decision. I was going to show everyone who Lucas truly was. Not through gossip or accusations but through cold, hard facts. And I was going to do it at his own wedding. It wouldn't be noisy or messy. It would be precise, controlled, and devastating. But initially I needed help. And the first person I phoned was Chris. Chris used to work for Lucas's old startup before it went bankrupt 2 years ago. He was their back-end developer, a smart guy with a mild demeanor. But he and Lucas had a falling out near the end. Something about unpaid equity and ghosted emails. We'd met once at a mutual friend's barbecue, and I remembered how casually Chris said, Lucas never paid his debts, just buried them under new logos. He picked up on the second ring. Hi Chris. It's Daniel Foster. We met at Noah's place last year. Oh hi. Yes, landscaping Daniel. What up? Do you still have the thumb drive? I asked. He paused. Do you mean the one with the email dumps? Yep. Another pause. Are you intending to sue him or something? No, I said. Just want to show a few people who they're marrying. Chris chuckled. You know, I've been waiting for someone to ask me that for 2 years. He emailed it over that afternoon. A compressed package that was password secured and contained exported PST files, PDFs, screenshots, and internal emails from Lucas, gloating about inflating user data, withholding contractor pay, and even insulting Olivia's father for believing I was anything other than a well-dressed parasite. Gold. But I didn't want it to come directly from me since it would appear malicious. I needed a buffer, so I contacted Rachel. Rachel was my ex, and we hadn't spoken in about a year, ever since we agreed to part ways due to our conflicting schedules. Rachel worked in public relations, genuine PR, reputation management, crisis cleanup, and corporate scandal spinning. She knows how to wreck someone's career without leaving a trace. She responded with a wary, Daniel, hi. Apologies for the unexpected call. You okay? Yeah, I said. But I need a favor and I'll owe you for it. Her tone altered. Talk. I told her everything. Not the childhood memories, not the envy, but the facts. The email dump, the wedding, the falsehoods, the people Lucas had duped, and the families about to be united under false pretenses. Rachel was quiet for a time. Then she said, Okay, here's what we do. We spent the next 3 hours planning. She assisted me in selecting the juiciest, most indisputable documents, including emails with timestamps, a PDF of bounce checks, screenshots of Slack messages where Lucas joked about renting friends in suits for a meeting with Olivia's parents, and a photo of an Excel sheet where he padded investment numbers before pitching a fake app idea. We developed a tight, professional dossier that was both succinct and scary. And then we set up a fictitious Gmail account called Eventattendee101 and timed the email. Rachel had a contact on the Langston family's wedding planning team, a friend of a friend who confirmed the rehearsal dinner for Friday at 6 p.m. We planned an email at 5:50 p.m. with a single subject line, "Before you toast the groom." But it was only the beginning. I wanted to plan for the aftermath of Lucas's wedding, not simply dismantle it. So I started accumulating everything Lucas had done to me personally. I filed an incident report with the city about the phony business complaint, supplied IP addresses for the reviews, and Rachel knew someone at Google who proved they were from Lucas's apartment complex. I recorded all the dates and links. I wasn't planning to pursue charges just yet, but I needed the ammunition. Then I did something I should have done months ago. I sat down with my parents. They invited me over for lunch one weekend. Mom said she wanted to go over family preparations for the wedding, and I said I'd come if we could have a true chat without filters. They agreed and we sat on the back patio. Mom poured iced tea while Dad cooked chicken. It was silent for the first 8 minutes until I remarked, "I know what Lucas has been doing." Dad froze. "What do you mean?" I stared at him directly. False complaints, sabotage, the municipal report, BBB falsehoods, and the review bombing. I have proof, and I am done pretending it did not happen. Mom laid her glass down with a quiet clink. Why would Daniel do that? Because I constructed it without him. Because I gave up playing the failure. Because it made him feel smaller. Dad didn't say anything. He just gazed into the grill. I got into my bag and handed Mom a folder that was well printed, tabbed, and structured with everything Lucas had done. She studied the traceable anonymous emails, screenshots, and digital fingerprints for a long time before whispering, "Oh my God." I waited until Dad added, "He's your brother." "No," I responded quietly. "He's a bully in a tuxedo." Neither of them defended him, and I left the folder with them. I didn't say I was going to blow up the wedding. I didn't need to. They both knew something was coming. Less than 20 minutes after the email was sent, my phone rang. It was Grandpa, and all he said was, "Boy, you should get down here. The dam just broke." I sped the entire way there. Grandpa had not sounded concerned, but there was an urgency in his voice, as if he'd seen 1,000 fires and just discovered a new one in his living room. When I pulled up to the Langston estate, the parking attendants didn't even stop me because they were too distracted by the yelling coming from inside. The rehearsal meal had already gotten off track. I slipped in through a side entrance and found myself in a hallway lined with family portraits and towering floral arrangements that looked like they cost more than my first car. Through the archway ahead, I could see the main dining hall, long tables with half-eaten plated hors d'oeuvres, scattered wine glasses, and a piano player frozen in mid-note. The wedding planner hovered nearby, pale and shaking, clutching a phone in both hands, and Lucas held a stack of printed emails in his hand. From 20 feet away, I could see the header on one Slack transcript. I stepped forward gently, clinging to the wall, not wanting to be caught in the explosion radius just yet. Olivia was shouting something harsh, her voice trembling. "So you did ridicule my father? You did exaggerate the figures? You lied about everything, even your equity and startup." Lucas shouted back. "They've been taken out of context. It is sabotage. Someone is attempting to ruin me. Daniel. It's Daniel. I know it is." He turned so quickly that his wine spilled across the carpet. "Where is he? Where in the heck is he?" "Right here," I responded, walking into view. Heads turned, and guests backed away as if I were a live grenade. Lucas's furious and frenzied eyes fastened on me. "Do you think this is clever?" He spit. "Ruining my wedding weekend with an immature vengeance scheme?" I strode forward, hands in pockets relaxed. "I didn't crash anything," I stated. "I was invited. Remember? Cream envelope with gold writing. Something about muck on boots." Olivia's father spoke next, quietly but with grit in his voice. "Is this true? Did you rig our investment call? Did you falsify the returns?" He questioned Lucas. Lucas paused for too long. Olivia walked away from him, gripping the folder as if it physically killed her to do so. "Do you remember what I told my mother?" she said, her voice shaking. "You were the most honest man I had ever encountered. Even if you came from a drama-filled household, you were clean. I defended you often. And this is who you truly are. I didn't mean for any of it to get. You didn't mean to get caught, she said. That's not the same. One of the Langston uncles, a large man with a silver beard and a fine blazer, stood and moved to her side gently and decisively. That told me everything. She was not going to let this go, not even for appearances, not even for her wedding. Lucas rushed at me suddenly, not with a punch, because he wasn't that type of man, but with a powerful shove that screamed desperation rather than strength. I scarcely moved. I simply glanced at him and murmured, "You've spent your life trampling on those who won't fight back. You felt you could always get away with it. But Lucas, you forgot something. Some of us construct. We don't make things up. We don't charm our way through. We grind. And one day we stopped being silent. You ruined everything," he hissed. "No," I said. "You did." When security arrived, I didn't protest. There was no reason to. When one of Olivia's relatives stepped in and reminded them I was invited, they backpedaled, and I went out alone, leaving the fire to burn behind me. The Langstons canceled the wedding within 24 hours, but the location remained booked. Instead, they utilized it for a family reunion brunch, which made the headlines in a wonderfully indirect way. Olivia made a polite but undeniable breakup statement on Instagram. Some realities arrive late, but they do. Lucas attempted to spin it, claiming sabotage and that the documents were fabricated. But Rachel had given copies to the Langston legal team along with verification trails, IP records, and a clear timetable. It wasn't just accurate, it was bulletproof. Olivia's father withdrew their family's investment from Lucas's holding company, triggering a breach clause in Lucas's remaining financing, and leaving him owing money he didn't have. My father did not intervene this time, and 2 weeks later, I received a phone call from him. He didn't apologize explicitly, which was not his way, but he did say, "I was mistaken about you, Daniel, for a long time," and that was enough. Mom called too and cried, saying she didn't recognize her own kid anymore. I didn't specify which son she was referring to, but a few days later she sent me a letter, including images from my childhood that I had never seen before. I put them in a drawer. I wasn't ready yet, but I'd get there eventually. Grandpa arrived at my job site 2 weeks later with a folding chair and a bag of lemon drops, and he sat there for 8 minutes without saying anything, watching the staff work. Then he glanced at me and said, "Damn, that was a good retribution. Clean and surgical. You get that from your grandmother." I chuckled. That spring I signed 2 additional commercial leases. The plaza was fully occupied. I employed 5 more people, purchased a new vehicle, and my accountant informed me that I had made my first $1 million. Nobody handed it to me or opened a door for me. Instead, I kicked it down and created a better one. Lucas, last I heard, he was consulting for a friend's software startup in another state. Small time. Still pursuing big talk with no motor behind it. He sent me a message with only one line. "Do you believe you've won?" I didn't answer, because I already knew I had won. And not because he lost, but because I finally stopped living in someone else's shadow. I wasn't the letdown but the template. And the next time someone refers to me as the other foster brother, I will simply grin and accept it.